From the beautiful Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, this is the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. We take questions from anyone in the dental profession and discuss what it takes to win not only in dentistry, but in life. Business, leadership, relationships, parenting, health and wellness, money management, nothing is off limits on the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host, and have over 20 years of experience to pull from. Learn from my mistakes and let me help you collapse time so you can become the best version of yourself. Yo, welcome back. Dr. Jason here, Dental Lighthouse Podcast. Super excited about my guest today. Have a good friend of mine, a previous coaching client, Dr. Jason from the great state of Illinois. Jason, how are you doing?
Good, man. Great. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So Jason reached out. He had some questions about a couple different things. I think what we're going to do is going to start off by unpacking some partnership questions that he had. So I'm going to give the mic over to Jason, let him share some context to his situation. As always, I'll ask some clarifying questions, and then we'll try to come up with a solution that's going to serve Jason, his prospective partners, his organization, and most importantly, his life. So Jason, go ahead. What do you got for me, brother?
Yeah, awesome. So I own a group practice. I've owned this practice for 10 years now. And we more recently, as of about 13 months ago, moved into a bigger expanded space. It is 2 full-time dentists and then myself as a part-time dentist. I work 2.5 days a week. We run with anywhere between 4 to 6 hygienists a day, depending on how many doctors are working that specific day. And we also have specialists that come in the office. We have an orthodontist that comes in three days a month, and we're ramping her up a little bit. We have a periodontist that comes in 1 day a month. We have a general dentist that does IV sedation and wisdom teeth that comes in 1 day a month to every once in a while, twice a month. And who am I forgetting? I think that's it.
That's enough.
Yeah, for sure. It's enough. Last year we did, should I talk numbers or no?
I don't think we need to talk numbers, but it sounds like it's a big, successful practice, multi-million-dollar. I would guess you're probably in the $3 to $5 million range, somewhere in there. And that's awesome, man. I'm super happy for you. So with that context of what you guys currently have, what obstacles, pain points are you facing from a partnership perspective?
Yeah, so we don't have any partnerships set up now, or not even a structure for it. I've had associates in the past stay anywhere from 3 to 5 years, and it always hurts when they leave. And then there's, the patients feel it too, and they love those doctors. And I really would like to get a structure in place, either with an associate more long-term than that, or partnership. I just feel like this is my only practice. I do have the building where my old practice was, half a mile down the street. And hopefully by the end of the year, we're going to get that open back up. It's fully equipped and ready to go. And we're going to place the specialists there, because the days the specialists are in this office, it is a little bit cramped. We're 14 ops, but it does get cramped when we've got 3 doctors and a specialist working, especially ortho, because they take 4 rooms of the 14. And then we see emergencies. We have online scheduling for emergencies, and we try to keep 2 of our rooms open for that, because we get quite a few emergencies from the marketing of that. So I just want to keep associates or offer a partnership track right from the beginning. But I'll have to say, this is my baby. And if I had my ideal way, I'd just have the long-term associates that aren't partners. But I know that's probably not realistic. And I am open to partnership. I just don't know what a structure would look like or what's right for me before I go to an organized group to help me set that up.
Yeah. It's great information. And, before we unpack it, it's funny, for those of you guys that don't know, listeners that don't know, Jason and I have a little bit of a history. I've been blessed to give him a little bit of mentorship over the last, 5-6 years now. It seems like it's been a long time. And
2018.
2019?
18.
18? Yeah. So 6 years.
Jason was one of my first accountability partners.
And it's just so funny to hear. It reminds me of the Dan Sullivan, Benjamin Hardy book, Gap in the Gain, where he's like, now we're a little cramped. Like, well, I mean, we've gotten into like this 14 operatory, just beautiful, like mega practice. And there's already situations where space is limited, right? So it's like, it's just such an amazing thought process of like, these are problems for sure, but like, how blessed are we to have these problems, right? Like, how blessed are we to have like a 14-op practice where we're so busy that there's days that we're craft. Like, it just kind of blows my mind, and I'm just so excited for you and how far you've come, and it's been really fun to watch from afar.
And I'm so thankful for you, because I remember when we first connected through DSI, which we're both a part of, and then DSN, and I joined shortly before you did, and you were looking for accountability partnership. And then I remember you're so phenomenal and helped me out so much over these years that you said, hey, well, send me a little document about your practice and what you got going on and your goals and everything, and I'll send you mine. And you sent me yours, and it blew me away. It was so detailed. It was so long. And I said, my wife's a psychologist, and I said to her right away, I said, I'm in way over my head here. And she said, you're not, this is an accountability. That's all. So he's going to tell you his things, you'll tell your things. And I learned so much from that. And over the years, I've really gotten my goals and everything. I've followed suit with you and tried to get them more detailed. And this last year, I took 2 weeks off, and I really dove into that. And it was such a good feeling. And it's really kind of set me up for the future and knowing where I'm going, at least for now. And so thankful for that. And we've had so many conversations over the years of just even with associates. I said, this associate isn't working out. And I knew what you were going to ask me, or, did they have clear expectations? I'm like, I want to, I'm going to get rid of this associate. Do they know it's coming? And I knew you were going to say that. And no, they don't know it's coming. And you're like, you failed them, right? And I'm like, yep, I know it. I screwed it up again. So it's been this evolution. And I'm just so thankful for you to have given me this advice over the years and to be in the position I'm in now. We had 50% growth in 1 year. And what really drove me crazy this last year is not being to capacity. I was so used to the busyness of the old office and 8 ops, and then to go into the space and not be at capacity was driving me nuts, and really had to put things in perspective, and just super thankful for you and all the other coaches to like really reel me in and realize, like, stop moving the goalposts forward, look back at where you were a year ago and the hiring and the training and all that. So thank you so much.
I appreciate you saying that. And I think that's a great segue to some of the questions I'm about to ask you now, right? So
yeah,
nobody loves associate turnover. That's clear. And associate turnover is a hindrance of business growth and customer service and what have you. But it ultimately comes back to vision. And if your vision is very black and white, if you're set in this vision of growing to a certain point, either revenue wise, operatory wise, profitability wise, whatever it is, if you're set on growing to this certain point, then you're going to have to ask yourself, how am I going to get there? And if you're insistent on getting there without sharing equity, perfect. Only one person gets to make that choice. It's you. If you're insistent on not having equitable partners as part of that vision, that there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that a side effect of that will be some turnover, some patient attrition, some struggle with optimal customer service. If you're open to some level of partnership, then it just means, yes, we're going to still get to this goal. The advantage is less doctor turnover, better patient experience, better patient continuity. The disadvantage, obviously, is you've given up a little bit of equity with your baby. So I can't make that decision for you. That's ultimately a decision that you'll have to make. Now, I know from my own lived experience, I have some pretty lofty aspirational goals for my organization. And I made the determination that I would need to minimize associate turnover in an effort to get to where I want to go in a way that I feel comfortable with getting there. So for that reason, I was open to partnership to help me get there. Again, that what I'm doing is working for me. What you're going to do is you're going to have to sleep at night, right? You're going to have to feel comfortable with your decision. So that's the first thing, right? We have to decide, how open am I to partnership? And then before we even talk about that, I think we need to have a conversation of, why did these doctors leave? Now, if the real reason is they flat out wanted to be partners and you said no, then okay. But do you feel like that was the real reason, or was there more of an underlying reason that you did have some turnover up until this point?
Yeah, so I'm definitely open to partnership for long-term goals. I want to get to 2 days a week by clinical days. Of course, I'm here and I'm working on weekends and all that stuff, but 2 clinical days a week by the end of the year. And like I said, definitely open to partnership. I've had numerous associates over the years, over the last 17 years of my career. And I've only had one that was interested in partnership. And just to be honest, I was so early in my journey that I had no clue. And he's actually a member in our group now, and he's doing really well. And I'm so happy for him. And I haven't had anybody recently who's wanted partnership. So I haven't had anybody leave because I didn't offer a partnership, but it's something that I do want to have in place going forward. We do plan on hiring a part-time doctor at some point in this year, probably towards the end of the year. And I want to start looking now because it may take a while. And we are in August taking over the patient base of a retiring doctor. So I just want to plan for all of these things and do better than I've done in the past. The most recent doctor to leave was left about, I'm going to say about 6 months ago. And it was because as we moved into this space, I didn't have enough patients to support the doctors we had. I didn't have enough pre-planning and organization in place to support everything we had going on, and hiring and not training as well as I could have as we moved into this bigger space. And she definitely felt that and wanted something, and she wanted better accountability held for all these people that we had. So that's what she left for. And it hurt. And it really sent me into a process of relooking at everything, rebuilding processes and systems, because we were breaking the systems we had for sure. And just accountability. I've had issues with myself holding people accountable, and we've changed a lot of things there too. And that's coming with pain points and struggles. But that's why she had left. Other associates that left were just, they were getting to be more high performers, higher in production, and they just wanted their own thing, and I was fine with that. Another associate, her husband was a dentist, and they were taking over her husband's dad's practice, and that's why she left. And that's really the history, basically.
Yeah. Awesome. So yes, I think we should come up, if you're open to partnership and you agree that partnership is one of the tools that's going to help you get to your vision, then we should come up with a framework. But I also want you to realize that everything that you just unpacked, I only heard one specific example of someone leaving because you didn't have a partnership structure in place. So that's great. I also love the idea of, the listeners and my coaching clients have heard me say, we either win or we learn, right? We never win or fail. We either win or we learn. And it sounds like in your situation with this female associate leaving, the one that cut you a little bit, sounds like you learned from it, right? So you didn't just like sweep it under the rug. You're like, okay, well, we got to change some things internally. We got to set up better systems, better accountability. So that's awesome, right? So I'm not glad that she left, but I'm glad that it motivated you to change things for the greater good. So if we're going to talk about partnership, there's a couple of things I want to unpack just at a high level, and we can take a deep dive into any of these things. One is there's two types of partners in my world. There's, let's call them silent partners, and then let's call them true partners, right? So true partners are partners where you're delegating or outsourcing to them leadership responsibilities, ownership responsibilities. The classic example is a doc in your situation takes on a partner at, let's say, 25%, 30%, 35%. That's a big chunk. And with that is going to come responsibilities. For example, you are now going to be responsible for running the HR processes, the P&L, the numbers, so to speak. And this new partner is now going to become the clinical director. They're going to become someone that's fully responsible with calibrating the clinical systems, onboarding and making sure the onboarding and the training of the assistants, the hygienists, and the other doctors are dialed in, systematizing the room setup, all of these things, right? Because that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work away from the chair. But if I'm going to offer up a level of equity, let's say the threshold is 25%. If I'm going to offer up 25% or more of my baby, then it's going to come with a lot of additional responsibility. In this fictitious example, wearing the clinical director hat. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the first thing we need to decide. All right. Are we going to have a silent partner, or, like I said, I forget what I said, vocal partner or whatever, a non-silent partner. So that's the first decision. The next decision is if it's going to be a silent partner, and by silent, I mean they come in, they do great clinical dentistry. They're a good role model. They lead by example, but they don't have any non-clinical responsibilities, or they don't have any responsibilities away from the chair, so to speak. They come in at 8 o'clock. They do great dentistry. They're a good person. They leave at 4, and they don't think about it again until the following day at 8 o'clock. That's not you. That's not me. I know we're falling asleep thinking about it. We're dealing with stuff on the weekends. But in my organization, there is room for those people. Now they're able to become partners. They become partners at a much smaller level of equity, usually in that 5% range. But it's a good deal for them because they're seeing the benefits of ownership through distributions, through, if we ever have a buyout, then they'll be able to experience a capital event when that happens. But they don't have any of the non-chair side responsibilities that you or I have, or that a bigger partner would have, a vocal, I forget what I called it, but a vocal partner. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. It does.
So the next question I guess we need to answer is, what type of partner do you want? Is it someone that's going to help you with the day-to-day responsibilities? Is that the main goal because you feel overwhelmed? Or is the main goal to just prevent turnover? And if that's the case, then we can offer smaller chunks of equity with the understanding that you're a partner and I'm not asking you to do any additional responsibilities, but your equity stake is going to be small because of that. Have you thought that through?
I have, yeah. So I'm still naive and ignorant in this space, but the way I see it is, if I had my ideal world, it would be like the 5% ownership and, but they still have, inputs on how the practice is ran if they want to. But I guess what I'm very open to, and I think is more ideal, is having the different tracks of partnership. So one being like where they could have a little bit higher percentage and they would have responsibilities within the practice. Not that I feel overwhelmed now, but I'm definitely open to somebody, especially if it's a weak suit of mine, picking up that responsibility or something that I enjoy less, and then having that track in place. And then if somebody just was interested in 5%, they didn't want any responsibilities. They just wanted to be an awesome clinician and still support their team well, then be able to have that option, or the track of an associate that I don't want ownership, but I just want something a little bit more than just run-of-the-mill associateship. So if there were kind of 3 tracks, I feel like that would work, but I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I appreciate you clearing up one of the things that I said. Just if you had someone that was, we'll call them a silent partner or a 5% partner, that doesn't mean that you're not going to listen to them and you're not going to take their input and use it to make the office better. What I was trying to communicate was this particular person doesn't have specific roles or responsibilities that you're going to have to keep them accountable for away from the chair, right? So by all means, like, you would want to sit down with all of your doctors, partners and non-partners, and say, okay, what are we doing well? What needs work? Give me some feedback. And I know you would take that feedback, and if it's good feedback, you would run with it. But what I'm saying more so is, if we're going to entertain an equity partner at a higher percentage, then it goes beyond them just giving feedback. Now they actually are wearing a different hat in the organization. The example I gave before was the clinical director hat, and you'll have to flush out all of the roles and responsibilities that are associated with that clinical director hat, and then keep them accountable or have conversations to make sure that they stay accountable to wearing that hat. So I love how you framed your question. So let's have a menu, right? So let's have a menu of partnership options. So at the highest level, we would have a buy-in, right? So we'll describe that as a situation where you have the practice evaluated or appraised. It comes back at X amount of dollars. Let's, for this particular example, just say 5 million. And you'll have to come up with a percentage that you're willing to give up. Let's say 20%, right? So if it's a $5 million practice and you're willing to give up 20%, you don't need to be a PhD in math to say that the price is going to come around $1 million for them to have 20% of ownership. Now, again, like I said, with that level of equity, I would have additional responsibilities for the person. We've already kind of talked that through. That also means that this person is eligible for distributions at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter. How traditionally it would work is all the doctors get paid a percentage of their own production or collections, however you do it. And then at the end of the day, you look at whatever profitability is left in the practice, and you would split it based on percent of ownership. One of the things that you'll have to be dialed in with is, okay, at the end of the month, we have $200,000 in profit. How does that $200,000 get split up? So you'll have to be really dialed in with, okay, this amount goes towards debt. This amount goes towards projected taxes. This amount goes towards rainy day fund. And then what we have left, we're going to split 80-20. Does that make sense for that first example?
It does.
Do you have any questions about that first example?
Yeah, I guess I do. So we were at 50% overhead before we moved into this space, meaning paying the doctors 30% of, we actually do collections, 30% of collections, and then 50% with our variable expenses and our fixed expenses. So it left 20% profit, and we had very little debt service at that time. Now I've got a lot of debt service to the tune of about $40,000 a month. Yeah. And we're at 58% overhead. So we're working on getting that back down. And I know we will this year. But I guess before I entertain a partner, that's like a non-negotiable, right? I've got to get that overhead back down so there is profit. And then the second question is, what if you run into a month where your overhead is high for whatever reason, and then there's actual loss? what does it look like then for the partner? Would be my question. Hopefully that won't happen, but.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the 58% is going to directly affect your valuation. So as you know, when we reach out to people for valuations, they're basically looking at profitability or EBITDA, and then they're taking a multiple of that. So the first thing I would say based on your question is I would be pushing off the valuation of your practice until you can get that more dialed in. Because if it's a $5 million valuation at 50% overhead, it's not a $5 million valuation at 58% overhead. So get your ducks in a row, and I know you are, before you have a valuation to present to a prospective buy-in. Does that make sense?
It does. Yep.
Yeah. And your point about that is a great one. And this is where I have to do a lot of marriage counseling with partnerships is at the end of the day, the structure has to be in place that we take whatever free cash flow is left and we're in agreement as to how that free cash flow is divvied up. So in my world, by far, the number one thing is debt. Like we have to pay at least the minimum debt payments first. Okay. And then we take projected tax payments. In my world, I like to say 25% of profits is dedicated to an account for projected tax payments because nobody wants to be left, towards the end of the year and your account gives you a call and says you owe $250,000 or $300,000 in taxes. And you're like, what? I don't have that cash lying around. So you have to pre-plan. So first you pay off all the debt or the monthly debt payment. Secondly, you put money away every month as a projected tax payment. A good rule of thumb is 25% of free cash flow. I think that's conservative. So it's a good rule of thumb. The next allocation of funds is for, you could call it a rainy day fund. You could call it a capital expenditure fund. You can call it an ER fund, whatever you want to call it. You have to be aligned with your partner that every month, once those funds are available, we're going to dedicate $10, $15, $20, $25,000 to this rainy day fund or to this ER fund. And then whatever's left after that, we'll divide up 80-20. If you have a month where you're in the red, it is what it is. Like nobody gets distributions. Nobody gets to experience any of the benefits of being an owner that month. But that's, as you know all too well, that's entrepreneurship. So it basically comes down to, if you're going to be an equity partner, there's two major situations where it's going to benefit you financially. It's going to benefit you financially on a monthly or quarterly basis from a distributions perspective, assuming that you're running a good business and you're in the black every quarter. But even if there's months where you're not, it's ultimately going to benefit you when the sale of the practice occurs, right? So you're slowly but surely increasing the value of this thing. And this person's 20% that they paid, in theory, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, is going to be worth a hell of a lot more than what they paid for it. So they're kind of winning on both sides. And I have to have those conversations with prospective partners and current partners when we have a bad month or a bad quarter and they're frustrated. That make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So that would be the first example of a partnership. The next example,
Can I ask a question just really quick?
Yeah, of course.
So like I said, I don't know how this works. So the current debt service on the practice, that wouldn't be the debt service that a partner's taking on, right? Their debt service would just be any equipment bought after that, or no, are they taking on some of the debt service of the current, or is that just all negotiable? I don't know how that works.
Yeah. So as a partner in the organization, they're agreeing. And again, this is why you guys would have to have conversations before you go buy another practice, right? So you have to be in agreement, and this has to do with voting rights and stuff like this, and conversation for another podcast. But assuming you're in agreement to outfit an additional 2 rooms of equipment, and you're not going to pay cash because you don't have the money in your rainy day fund that we just talked about building up, then you're taking on that additional debt. You're taking it on together. So once you take this free cash flow number at the end of the month or at the end of the quarter, you're paying down whatever debt that you guys had agreed upon that you guys now have in place, and then going to the projected tax payment, and then to the rainy day fund, and then ultimately to the distributions. So this is why it's so important to be aligned on the direction that you're taking this thing. Because if you want to continue to grow in a way where you're going to have to take on more debt, but your partner is not aligned that way, then that's a red flag. Or more importantly, what I see is if you're someone who believes that, yes, you have to pay off the debt first, but you also have to save for taxes, and you also have to save for a rainy day, and the partner is not a proponent of putting away money for taxes and not a proponent of putting away money for a rainy day, then there's going to be a clash there, because the partner says, I want that money, I want my distribution after debt's paid. And you're going to have to say to him, no. What we're built on is paying off the debt and saving money for taxes and saving money for a rainy day fund. And then we'll split the distribution. So, you know how we do it to get around that is we have our contract set up in a way where nobody's allowed a distribution unless the majority owner takes a distribution. And if the majority owner takes a distribution, then every partner gets a distribution based on their percentage of equity. So a great example is we're in the process of building a brand new office, very similar to you. This is going to be a big office, 45 operatories. I'm worried about cash. So I'm not taking any owner distributions for 2025. So because I'm not taking any owner distributions, nobody gets owner distributions in the group. Make sense?
Yeah, so that's just in your contract already. So that's a given, and they know they have to be all right with that going into it.
Right. And that's why you're dating before you get married, right? That's why you're having all of these conversations proactively before anyone's, contacting a lawyer or contacting, an M&A broker or something like that to start working on partnership documents.
And they, as the partner comes in, they're not taking on any of my current debt service. It would just be debt service after the partnership.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's different ways to do it. Typically, we would take on debt after the partnership, but there are people out there that will take it into the valuation. So let's say it's valued at $5 million. That's a debt-free valuation. So they could look at it of, okay, it's got $1 million in debt. It was valued at $5 million, but there's $1 million in debt. So it's a net valuation of $4 million.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But I just think to keep it easy, the new partner just takes on the debt service that's currently there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So we have that the next one is let's call it a silent owner or a minority, super minority, whatever you want to call it. There's a couple ways to do that. One could be with, again, writing a check for X amount of dollars to own 5%. What we do in our organization is through RSUs, or restrictive stock units. And I have podcasts out there talking about this, but specifically it's for the doctor that wants to be a partner, doesn't want to make a huge investment because they just got out of school or they're buying a house and all of these other things. So they're able to accrue equity through their own production. So how it works from a 30,000 foot level is they have to be a great core value fit. They have to be with me for at least a year. They have to be invited to partnership by myself and the rest of the partners. And then we set up what we call a production hurdle. And for every dollar over that production hurdle, a small percentage, I think it's 20, don't quote me on that, but I think it's 20%, gets rolled into equity in the organization. Now, again, this is a whole different podcast, and I have podcasts out there that cover this. But when they earn equity, it's first in unvested or non-vested shares, and those shares vest over time. So it's a really good way to recruit and retain doctors who are not interested in having a lot of additional responsibility and who do not want to write a big check, like $1 million for 20%, but do want to have their sweat equity have some value associated with it and do want someplace to call home.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think the third or final, it could be any combination of, partner in name only, let's call it, or basically a non-legal partner. And there's a lot of different models for that. We could do something with phantom equity, where you're basically treating them as, say, a 10% partner. So they get distributions. You give them some additional responsibility, but they didn't have to write a check. And legally, they're not truly a partner. So if you ever sell or something like that, there wouldn't be any windfall of cash to them. There's stuff like increasing their percentage of compensation. So let's say you start new doctors off at 30% and you have someone that you want to keep around, but you don't feel that they're quite ready for partnership. You could talk about increasing it to, say, 33%. You could talk about a tiered compensation system where maybe for the first 100 grand per month, they get paid at 30 grand. If they do 100 to 125, they get 33%. If they do north of 125, they get 35%. That's another phantom equity tool. But it ultimately comes down to one-on-one conversations. I have one-on-one conversations with all my docs, and I'm really trying to figure out what's important to them. So if money is truly important to them, then we could talk about one of the tools that I just unpacked. But for some of them, it's PTO. For some of them, it is an increased continuing education allowance. For some of them, it's not working, 4 days a week. They want to work 3 days a week. So my job, I feel like one of my jobs as an owner is, if I'm in front of a doctor who's a great core value fit, good clinical skill set, I want to understand what they want out of their profession and their career. And am I in a position to give it to them in an effort to retain them for as long as possible?
Sure.
So we just unpacked a lot there, Jason. What questions, concerns, thoughts do you have about that?
Do you think it is smart or manageable to have those different tiers that we just talked about, or would you prefer not to set it up like that? And I know everybody has their different interests in what they want as an owner, but do you think that's something that's feasible to set it up like that, different tracks?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I'm a fan of keeping it simple. I think that as you have more and more things on the menu, then it can get overly complicated for everybody involved. Mm-hmm. So the short answer to that question is, I think you should offer one kind of partnership.
Okay.
Or maybe I'll say it a different way. I would push the phantom equity stuff first, or those non-partnership tools that we just unpacked a few minutes ago. And if that's not moving the needle, then I would go with some type of low-level minority partnership, either buying in with a max cap of, say, 5%, or like the RSU model. Now, all of that being said, everyone's got a strategy till they get punched in the mouth. I have a doctor who last year on 3 days a week did $2.4 million. Now she's a partner through the RSU model. She's a great core value fit. I love her to death. She mentors a lot of the other doctors. If she came to me and said, I want an additional 10% in this business and I'm willing to write you a check, let's get it valued, then I would probably say yes. So, it's easy to just paint with a broad brush, but everybody's got different circumstances, and losing her would really hurt us, not necessarily financially, because I can find 2 docs to replace her and 2 docs that can do $1 million a piece. But from a cultural perspective, she's been with me 10 years. She mentors the other doctors. She's exactly who we want as far as partners. So I would probably make some exceptions if that situation were to present itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what about the situation, you have a doc that you'd certainly consider as a partner, and they're like, the RSU model for 15% doesn't move the needle for me. 15% equity just isn't going to do it. It's not something that I had in mind. And I know what you're going to say is just like, that's a decision you have to make. What are you willing to do? But I guess how would you, at my stage of the career, how would you handle that? Would you just make a defined thing in your head like, hey, this is where I'm at and this is what I'm willing to do or not willing to do, or where would you be, I guess?
Yeah, good question. So it depends on who I'm talking about, if who I'm talking with. If I'm talking with someone that is driven by logic, then I would logically explain to them why 15% may seem like a low number, but let's do some math, right? So just to unpack what the situation that you're talking about an RSU partner that could get up to say 15%. So right away, we know if it's an RSU partner, there's no buy-in. So they're basically earning 15%. They're not having to write a check. So you have to take that into consideration. The other thing you have to take into consideration in your specific situation is you're not the average practice. So people that are like, well, I want to be a 50-50 partner, they're typically talking about a 2-doctor, 4 hygienist practice that's doing like $2 million a year, right? So, so 15% of what you're building is a big chunk of money. And I would, again, if this person was driven by logic, I would show that to them, like in a spreadsheet, like, okay, Johnny, we're projected to do $6 million next year. We're projected to be at a overhead of 50% because that's where we were before. So that's $3 million in profit. And if after debt service and all that, you own 15% of that, that's a lot of money. That's more money than you being a 50-50 partner at the practice down the street that's doing 1.8 million. So, it's all about perspective. And I'm sure this guy had the right intentions and he really thought that like he wanted to be a higher percentage of ownership. But when it comes down to the actual dollars associated with that equity, I would bet 15% in your practice running at 50% overhead is worth at least as much, if not significantly more, than the practice down the street that's doing $2 million at 60% overhead, and they own 50% of that.
Right. Yeah. And if it wasn't the RSU model and they did want a bigger percentage, I just don't know that I would be good with that, to be honest with you. And I guess that's a decision that ultimately I just have to make. And I don't even know if the banks would lend that to a person a couple years out of school with the debt that they have. I don't know what that climate looks like. So I guess those are some decisions that I'd have to make and talk over with a company that helps to set up the partnerships.
Yeah. So 100%. So what I decided internally is I'm not going to get diluted more than 75%. So when I started taking on partners 4 or 5 years ago, my thought process was I want to have partners via the RSU model, and I will allow them to earn shares until I'm diluted to 75%. And once that percentage happens, then I'll reinvestigate what it should be. But again, to use the same logic I just gave you, my goal is to have a $50 million organization. Would I rather own 100% of a $5 million organization or 75% of a $50 million organization? I'd rather have the latter. So you just have to decide where you want to go and what level of dilution you're open to and make decisions based off of that.
And when you're saying that 75% dilution, so the most equity you'd give up is 25%. Is that understanding that right?
Correct.
And that would be like 25% in each individual practice.
So that's a question for another podcast, but sure. Our equity is at the organizational level. So if you own 5% in the company, you own 5% in everything. But it is a question that you're going to have to answer soon, especially if you start to outfit the older location. So does equity involve ownership at both clinics? Does it involve only at the clinic that you're working at? Again, just no right or wrong answer, but just questions that you'll have to figure out.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah. Awesome. But that was a great question. And hopefully some of the information that we covered today gives you a little bit more clarity on what questions to ask and how to navigate these conversations as they come up with your associates in the future. I certainly would encourage you, and I know you're already doing this, is when you are having your doctor one-on-ones, be the one to bring it up. Don't wait for them to bring it up. So if you can proactively, I like to say, handle the objection before it becomes an objection. If you can proactively say, have you thought about partnership? Do you want to talk about different models that we have available? So you're at least getting them thinking, and more importantly, they realize that there is an opportunity. You might not have it crystallized yet, but there's an opportunity here for this to be their forever home because partnership is available.
Sure.
All right, Jason, thank you so much for the time. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to reach out, brother. Okay.
Thank you.
Have a good one, brother.
Thank you. That wraps up another episode of the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. You have a choice today. Choose to be a lighthouse. Lighthouses are powerful and steadfast. They are beacons of light for others to reference when life gets turbulent. Go out into the world today and become a lighthouse for someone. Give more than you get. True joy comes from serving others. Start today. I'm Jason Tanoory, your host. Thank you for listening to the Dental Lighthouse Podcast. For more information, podcast show notes, or links to anything that we have discussed today, please check out our website, thedentallighthouse.com. We would love to hear from you. If you would like to get on the show, please email us at podcast@thedentallighthouse.com.